We are officially 2 weeks away from the start of training camp and Orlando Magic Media Day, so it's time for some player outlooks, and we'll start with the Magic's rookies. We haven't talked about them enough this summer, so what to expect from Anthony Black and Jett Howard this season for the Orlando Magic, plus the big question on how the Magic use them. We'll get to that on today's episode of Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is September 17th. It will be September 18th, 2023. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to start our player outlooks, take a look at what to expect from the Orlando Magic as we get ready for the start of the 2024 season. We're going to talk today about the two rookies, Anthony Black and Jett Howard, what to expect from them, plus a big question about how the Magic manage rookies at this new phase of the rebuild. We believe at least is a new phase of the rebuild. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. First, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, this great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. This episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Go back to June. And that June night, late June, early, getting ready into early July, the Orlando Magic had what I think a lot of people considered a shocking draft night. It was, I wouldn't say shocking because I think a lot of us saw the Anthony Black pick coming, especially Jett Howard. We'll get to him in a minute, but the skill set we certainly expected. The player they picked, we did not. It was a weird draft night. And as I've thought about this draft night and I've thought about what the Magic could have done on draft night. And, I had my own experience with the Locked On NBA mock draft earlier in the summer. It's way back when in June. Who knew? I don't know if there was a quote unquote perfect draft for the Orlando Magic, unless player with such clear star potential like an Ausar Thompson or an Amen Thompson fell to them. I know there's some fans who think the Magic should have gone after Cam Whitmore. Even then, I'm not sure there was a perfect draft night for the Orlando Magic. Because at the end of the day, the Orlando Magic have a lot of needs filled, or they have a lot of young players that they're intently focused on developing. More than anything, and I think this was a point that I hope I tried to drive home, but I'm going to drive it home here right now. This Orlando Magic team did not need the draft this year. Let me rephrase that. They always need the draft. We're a small market. Drafting well is essential to the success of this franchise and the successful and the way this team is going to necessarily have to grow. So yes, the draft is really, really, really important. What I mean by the Magic did not need the draft this year is for the first time in a very long time for the Orlando Magic, the Magic did not need a home run pick. They were not entering the draft seeking a superstar. They were not going into the draft saying, we need to get the player that's going to define our team for the next decade. They got that last year in Paolo Banchero. You could say they got that the year before in Franz Wagner. We still don't really know what Jalen Suggs is. They have, for the first time in a very, very long time for this Magic team, they have established who they are already. They did not need to swing for the fences and hit it out of the park. If they do, great. No one's going to complain. And so, this is going to be the theme of this episode, I think, is, okay, a lot of stuff is already established. We think we have a proof of concept of what this team can be and what success looks like. Then what do the Magic need to get from their rookies? What do the Magic need? And so, especially with 2 first-round picks, My answer was the Magic needed to come out of draft night with shooting. We're going to talk about Jett Howard, what he adds on that front here in a minute. The 6th pick was always tricky because there was no player that fit perfectly. And Anthony Black does not fit perfectly necessarily into a role for this team. If we assume the starting lineup is Markelle Fultz, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Paolo, Banchero, Wendell Carter, and coming off the bench, you're using Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs at the guard spots. Jonathan Isaac's probably going to play a little bit. Mo Wagner, Goga Batadze, now yet in Joe Ingles. There's certainly a weakness in that backcourt, but not necessarily at point guard. And so what did the Magic do? They did create the seeming logjam at the guard spot and drafted a player with a lot of upside, Anthony Black, a player who checks a lot of boxes for the Orlando Magic. And it's the kind of player that the Magic typically do go after. And the kind of player the Magic typically do like to bring in. They grab that kind of a player and then are ready to just kind of see where it lands. At the very least, and again, I'm a big believer in this. You don't necessarily, especially that high in the draft, you take the best player and you figure it out later. Anthony Black was certainly among, if you go back to any of the draft boards and any of the draft rankings, Anthony Black is certainly not a pick that was illogical. He makes a lot of sense. And the skill set that he brings and the ideas that he brings and the way we know the Magic like to draft, he makes a lot of sense. 6'7" point guard, so he can play 1, 2, possibly even 3, where I think he's going to get a lot of minutes this year. He defends exceptionally well. He's good at getting into the paint, getting into the lane, can hold his own on the glass, can drive, can get to the basket. Great passer and distributor. This is a guy that can just do a little bit of everything. And then if the Magic can add a jump shot on top of that, which is obviously the big question about Anthony Black, then all of a sudden you have a player. You have something really interesting. And now that supposed point guard logjam you have, now you got to start asking. Now you can ask the questions. But this season for Anthony Black, I think, is going to be one of patience. One where you're going to have to take some of the good with the bad and understand that while Anthony Black, I think, is and can be a winning player, he may not be a winning player today. He may be a player that teams can game plan around. And especially when we get into the playoffs, his weaknesses could be something that become tough to deal with. Look, Black was one of the best defenders in the SEC last year. Very good basketball conference. I think he led or was top 5 in the SEC in defensive win shares, according to Sports Reference. We saw him at Summer League. We saw how good he was defensively. We saw how comfortable he looked getting around the court, even playing on what was later revealed by him to be a bad ankle. The Magic were not concerned about his physical production at Summer League. We all noted that, it felt like he could get anywhere, but he just wasn't getting that last bit of explosion to the basket. He was injured. He was playing hurt. We saw enough from him to be like, okay, there's something we can work with here. But that's going to kind of, I think, be the way things are for Anthony Black. There is something to work with. We're not going to sit here and say otherwise. The Magic have something they can work with, something they can build on, something they can build with, something they can grow with in Anthony Black. But his rookie year is going to be defined by keeping things simple and really allowing those other parts of his game to develop. I suspect that the Magic are going to use Anthony Black primarily as a backup 2, have him float between the 2 and the 3 a little bit. He's going to be on the ball plenty. The way the Magic run their offense, it's about versatility. Everyone should be able to do just about everything. And so even if Anthony Black is on the court with, say a Cole Anthony and a Franz Wagner, Franz can handle the ball. Anthony Black can handle the ball. Cole Anthony can handle the ball. Putting Black on the ball allows those guys to work off the ball, could get Cole Anthony better shots. He's the kind of player that's going to make others better because he has what I always call positional skill versatility, where he does things for a player at his size that you're not expecting a player of his size to be so good at. He is a guy who's 6'7", but has all the skills and control of a 6'2" point guard or 6'3" point guard, a traditional point guard. You're doing that at 6'7" against defenders, especially coming off the bench, who are not used to playing that. Plus, he is expected to be a plus defender. It's going to take time, though, for everything to come together. And so I will preach this repeatedly. Be patient with Anthony Black. Now, I could be wrong on all this. He could come out that first game and look like a superstar and be like, oh, well, that's that. But based on what we saw from Summer League, based on his college tape, there is something there. The defense is there. The passing is there. The ability to get to the paint is there. The ability to get downhill is there. Whether that all comes together and makes for a rookie year where he is making a real clear positive impact, pushes to get into the starting lineup, which I think he definitely has the potential to do. I'm not going to sit here and say he doesn't. Whether he can do all of that, that's the part that might take time. And yes, the shooting concerns are very real. They should be real. It's hard for guards to be successful in this league without that shot. It's what we talk about a lot with Jalen Suggs. It's what we talk about a lot with a lot of the players on this Magic roster. That part's going to take time. And I think for Anthony Black, this rookie season is going to be about doing the simple things, really focusing on excelling at the things he's really good at already, and then using the rookie contract the next 2 years, essentially, to fill in those gaps in his game and see how far he can take it. The question with Jett Howard, though, is a little bit different. Jett Howard is a player I think we can expect to contribute pretty quickly. We'll talk about what he brings on the shooting front coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word from our friends over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders. I think the Magic are still at 36.5 and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season today. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. I think back in July, I talked a little bit about the rookies. And I think I said this. I got a little heat for it, but I if this is the hottest take that I make, I'm going to stand by it. I do believe Jett Howard is going to have a more impactful rookie season than Anthony Black. That does not mean I think Anthony Black is not ultimately going to be a better player. I think Anthony Black is going to contribute and be a positive impactor for this team. I think he's going to do some good things. He's going to have some good games. He's going to have bad games. What I'm saying is the skills that Anthony Black has, they're enough to get him on the floor. They're enough to show that he can hold his own on an NBA court. But I think the skills that will ultimately lead him to his success are going to take a little bit more time to come around, especially within the Magic ecosystem, especially with what the Magic are going to be expecting him to do and the role the Magic are going to create for him. The role the Magic are going to create for him is saying, hey, come in, be a disruptor defensively, keep the ball moving, get in the paint, take an open shot when you get it. But when we get to the playoffs, which, again, we're all thinking about a little bit, and again, that's our big question coming up later, as we get into the playoffs, whether he's able to do all those things and do them successfully in those pressure situations is going to be a major question. With Jett Howard, though, his biggest skill, his major skill set translates pretty immediately to a role that's going to help him find success. Jett Howard is an excellent shooter. We saw that in Summer League, where he hit some really difficult threes in ways that he's probably not going to be asked to hit threes. There's obviously a lot of controversy in picking Jett Howard. He was off a lot of people's boards. Excuse me. I had him pretty low on my board. I didn't even do a draft profile on him because I didn't think he was under consideration. I had a lot of concerns about his defense. But undoubtedly, we all know what the biggest need on this Magic team is. They need shooters. They were 27th in the league in three-point field goal attempts per game last year. They're 24th or 25th in the league in three-point field goal percentage. They need shooters. In the modern NBA, if you're going to take that few threes, you better be a darn good three-point shooting team to keep up. The Magic need shooting. And so obviously they went out and signed Joe Ingles. They drafted Jett Howard to try and address the shooting need a little bit. And for that reason, Jett Howard could be really, really, really important to what the Magic are trying to do. He was a 36% three-point shooter last year at the college level, taking 7.5 three-pointers per game. The Magic's top guy in three-point field goal attempts per game last year was Gary Harris at 4.5. I know I'm probably the only one screaming this. The Magic got to find a way to get Gary Harris more three-point shots. And I know I did a podcast on this a couple weeks back that, when Gary Harris gets a lot of three-pointers, that's usually a sign the Magic's offense is working, that the Magic are having a really good offensive night. I looked it up. Like the games where Gary Harris took the most three-pointers in a game were like all top 10 offensive games by offensive rating for the Magic last season. That's what I'm saying. The Magic need guys who are not afraid to shoot threes. They need some volume three-point shooters, and there's just something they're so light on, but Jett Howard is a guy who's not afraid to take a shot off the dribble. He is out there to make threes, and we saw that obviously in Summer League. But in Summer League, he showed us that, hey, he has a little bit more mobility, has a little bit more ability to create some shooting off the dribble, to take guys off the dribble a little bit, to take, a two-dribble pull-up. He showed us a little bit more versatility defensively than I think we were expecting. The Magic certainly tried to sell everyone that, he is a much better defender than he showed at Michigan, where he was not a good defender. But Howard has this skill that the Magic need. Essentially, anytime if I pitched you a lineup of Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, you'd be like, okay, that's great. Where's the shooting? It's going to be hard to have too many lineups without shooting in it. And Jett Howard is one of the guys on this team that can shoot. Jett Howard is one of the guys that can make an outside shot, that can be a difference maker on that front. And, I don't want to say quite yet he's the best shooter on the Magic, but he certainly projects that way. If he is able to come into the league and immediately hit threes, especially if the Magic can get him some open threes and get him into rhythm, all of a sudden the Magic have a really dangerous weapon and a guy that just makes everyone else's life easier. That's more why the Magic need shooting. I say this a lot. Your ability to shoot threes, your ability to shoot and make threes isn't as important as how the defense thinks you shoot and make threes. Markelle Fultz could be a 35% three-point shooter on, say, 2.5 attempts per game. It doesn't matter if defenses still think he's a bad shooter. Like Wendell Carter is a solid three-point shooter for center. Nikola Vucevic shot 40% from three on like 3 or 4 attempts per game. Defenses were perfectly happy letting him shoot that three, though, because it meant he wasn't in the paint. And some of the games where Nikola Vucevic back in his Magic days, and even now with the Bulls, some of the games where Vucevic is settling for those threes, that's a win for the defense. And so, Terrence Ross was a 32% three-point shooter with the Orlando Magic, but teams feared those hot streaks that he would get on. He took enough threes and made enough of them and had enough big games that defenses started to we got to cover Terrence Ross. He's second on our list. Don't lose him or he could get hot and we'll be toast. It didn't matter that he shot a poor percentage. And so Jett Howard's the kind of guy where, especially if he has a nice start to the season, Jett Howard's the kind of guy that could have some gravity that keeps defenses on their toes, that keeps defenses focused on him, giving space to a Markelle Fultz or Jalen Suggs to cut to the basket, or a Paolo Banchero to cut to the basket, or a Franz Wagner to cut to the basket. That's why Jett Howard is potentially so valuable. And like everything else, yes, the Magic went for size. Why didn't they like Grady Dick? Well, Grady Dick wasn't a great defender with the Raptors in the Summer League. He's small. Why didn't they like Jordan Hawkins? I like Jordan Hawkins a lot. He had a little bit of Jett Howard honestly played better than both of them at Summer League from what I understand. Jordan Hawkins was 6'5" and a little small. Jett Howard is 6'7". He's big. The Magic played him at power forward in Summer League. They went super duper small at Summer League, and Jett Howard still held his own defensively, played better defensively. I think a lot of us expected him to. Held his own on the dribble, held his own offensively. They threw a lot at him in Summer League, and he still seemed to play very well. That's why I think Jett Howard is could honestly be a bigger factor for the team this year. But more than anything, he just gives you that safety. If everything goes right, of course, he just gives you that safety valve as a shooter. And that's honestly the most valuable thing, because when we talk about these rookies, the context in which we're talking about them is really important. Like I said, I think Jett Howard is probably going to contribute more to the Magic this year as a rookie than Anthony Black will. I still think Anthony Black is ultimately the better player. But this is the question. So much of a rookie's success is about development, the role they're put into, the role they're expected to play, and how they develop within that role. And that's kind of the tricky thing to predict with this Magic team. Jeff Weltman said it very, very clearly entering the draft process on draft night. We are at a stage in the Magic's development where rookies aren't being gifted playing time. Rookies got to earn their playing time. And it is very possible that both Jett Howard and Anthony Black, or one or the other, is not part of the rotation for stretches of the season. They're going to have to earn their way onto the court, and they're going to have to prove that they can help this team. And that's ultimately, I think, one of the bigger questions floating around this team, and certainly when it comes to the rookies. What takes priority? Short-term development to try and make the postseason, or long-term development of these young players? That's the question we're going to wrestle with coming up here in just a moment. So, like I said, I think on draft night, I gave the Magic a B- for their draft. I said, I like Anthony Black. I understand the pick. I think he was the best. I thought he was the best. I agree he was probably the best player on the board. Certainly some questions still to answer, not an A+ pick by any means. And then Jett Howard, I think on draft night, I said, that's not the guy I would have picked, but I understand the logic behind the pick. They needed a shooter. They got a shooter. I can't be upset about it. I would probably upgrade that to a B, just because, again, I don't know if there's an A+ draft out there for the Magic, because as I've kind of previewed about this season, so much of this season is about figuring out what the Magic actually need. And frankly, we don't know what the Magic needs. So this felt like the last draft for the Magic. We hope it's the last draft for the Magic, where they're just drafting talent alone. They went out, got the most talented player they could, Anthony Black. They went out and got a great shooter, went out and got their shooter in Jett Howard. They filled one need. They took an upside play on the other. That's about, when you have two lottery picks, especially, we talked about this during the draft process, take a swing with one player, go safe with another. They kind of took a swing with both, but, again, they filled the need with Jett Howard getting a shooter, and they took a little bit of a swing on Anthony Black, position, who cares about positions? We'll figure that part out. We are, Weltman said it himself, we're not gifting rookies playing time anymore. That is not the phase of the rebuild that we are at. The Magic are not going to simply say, hey, you're a rookie. We drafted you. We're invested in you. You're playing. Done. That's not happening anymore. There's a foundation established. There's a goal out there, a short-term goal out there to achieve. Rookies have to earn their playing time. And that's, excuse me, I'm so a little sick. And that's that's kind of the tension now as we enter the season. The big question for the Magic this season is how much of this season is still about long-term development, and how much of it is about the short term of making the postseason, of achieving that short-term goal. Now, I will say this before we dive too deep into this. The Magic are not going to sacrifice the long term for the short term. Certainly there's an expectation among fans. I'll say this. I expect this team to make the postseason this year. If the goal is to level up, they were the last team eliminated from the playoffs last year. There's only one place to go. There's only one place to level up from there. Bottom line, the Magic will not come out and directly say they're going to the postseason, but we even heard some of the legends that were at the tip-off event on Friday say it. We expect this team to be in the playoffs. We expect this team to take that next step. We expect this team to step up in that way. There's a lot of expectation on this team to be something more, to do something more. That's the truth of it. And certainly we expect them, I think we all share that excitement, that expectation. But the Magic are not going to sacrifice the long term for the short term. If the Magic season, I know some people who think the Magic need to be at least 500 or set like kind of hard and fast goals like that. But the fact of the matter is, if the Magic stumble out to the start, which they very well could, if the Magic find themselves 5 games back like they were in 2019, they're not going to go at the trade deadline and start making panic trades. They're going to evaluate and assess what they have. They're going to evaluate who they are and maybe question some of their assumptions about the team and be like, okay, now we know this answer. Now we have a clear idea of what this answer is. How do we move forward? This is not a season that's like playoffs or bust. If the Magic are something, I don't think this will be the case, but if the Magic are somehow not in the play-in chase or falling behind on the play-in chase, they're not going to trade a bunch of draft picks. They're not going to trade Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis for Serge Ibaka. That's something this team under Jeff Weltman is not going to do. If they do something like that, that's a problem. We know that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. You need a long-term organizational plan. Your development is not a straight line. Sometimes you falter. Sometimes you take a step back, but that reveals your path. You take a step back to get a bigger picture of the thing and understand the path forward. The path you went down didn't work. Take a step back, take another path forward. That you don't want that to happen, obviously, and there will be some more pressure to win because, we think Paolo and Franz are really good and time is running out on that. But this season is about figuring out, okay, what do Paolo and Franz actually need? Can they actually work together? Is this a group that can actually grow in the way that we expect them to? And that's the situation that the Magic's rookies are entering. Like I said, it's a short versus long-term proposition. And where this short and long-term proposition is going to really play out are the kind of players the Magic emphasize. Like I said, Anthony Black is going to need some patience. That kid is really good. I think he can be a really, really good player, but he's got some very big holes. And when the Magic are trying to play at a higher level, those are the kind of holes that teams exploit. Those are the kind of holes that make it really tough to stay on the court. So, let's say the Magic need this win. Let's say they're in a tight battle the last month of the season, and Anthony Black is struggling to shoot, and his minutes are a real struggle. Do the Magic keep an Anthony Black in for development's sake and maybe cost themselves a few games? Or do they tighten their rotation or stick with a Jett Howard or Joe Ingles or, a Cole, or whoever's in that spot, who could predict that far down? Do they stick with veterans that they can rely on and win those games down the stretch to make the playoffs? Or do they say, hey, Anthony needs these reps, needs this development time, needs to feel this pressure to get where we want to go? The same is true with Jett Howard. Let's say, if again, this is why I think Jett Howard might have a better rookie season, because he can help the short term as much as the long term. These are all real questions the Magic are going to be grappling with all year long. And it's not just about the rookies. It's everybody. It's everybody. Because this is a different phase of the rebuild. This is a different period for the Orlando Magic. It is no longer just about developing and getting better as a young team and getting experience. There is winning pressure. The Magic want to win. The Magic want to be in the postseason. I feel it. You feel it. The Magic won't come out and say it, but they feel it too. And so a lot of the decisions Jamal Mosley has made to this point, and we've talked about it on the show here, a lot of the decisions Jamal Mosley's made have sacrificed short-term gains for long-term reasoning. There are rotation decisions and roster decisions that he has made that we have questioned. But one thing I always praise Mosley about is he kept the long-term vision in mind with these decisions. He stuck with a lineup that maybe wasn't working in the short term, knowing that they needed the experience together. They needed to fail a little bit, perhaps, to get better in the long term. That was fine. And that was, I think that has largely paid off. I give Jamal Mosley a lot of credit for, pushing aside maybe some short-term panic or short-term decision-making to really build this team for a future that, it might be happening this year, a future that wasn't so far off. Is that posture going to change? If the Magic need a win to stay in the play-in race or to make the play-in tournament, is he going to decide to lose with young players, potentially lose with young players who need the experience but aren't ready to win? Or is he going to say, hey, we're going to stick with the veterans. We're going to go with Joe Ingles. I know I can trust him. I know what he does. We're going to win this game. Again, you can see it's a question and it's a theme that's going to permeate the franchise the entire season. That's our big question of the day. There's going to be a lot more questions to come soon. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at @PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places to podcast to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at @OMagicDaily. Also, be sure to check out the Orlando Magic Hub on Patreon. You can find a link to the latest free article on my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, on my Twitter page at @PhilipRR_OMD. On tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic is still TBD. We will have an episode, but I'm doing a guest spot that may turn into a full episode, but we'll see. There will be an episode tomorrow. It'll be a fun guest spot episode, or it'll be potentially another player outlook or something to that effect. Well, we got lots to get to. Don't worry, before the start of training camp. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. For Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.